Okay. Well, good afternoon, Reverend Bob.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
We are on the campus of the University of Florida,
Yes, sir.
and we're at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Department,
Okay.
specifically the Veterans Project. And we're here today. We're going to chat about you, your life, your military experiences. And why don't we start off? Well, actually, and of course, my name is Don Obrist. I'll be doing the interview. Now, tomorrow is your birthday,
Yes, sir.
91 years old.
Yes, sir.
Today's date is February 6, 2020. Tomorrow
Yes.
is the 7th of February.
Yes.
You were born in 1929,
Yes.
if I did the math right. Okay, now where were you born?
I was born on 135th Street in Manhattan, New York.
Well, that's very specific.
Yeah,
That's great. In New York City.
New York City,
Okay.
New York State.
Now, how large is your family? You have brothers and sisters.
They're both deceased. My brother, Leo, he was retired Navy also, and he got mesothelioma, and he passed away at age 65 a number of years ago. And I have a half-sister. She passed away also. So I'm the only one left.
Okay. Okay, now, what about your mom and dad? Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Well, I came up in foster care. Let me back up a little bit.
Sure.
My mother lived in Weldon, North Carolina. And her name was Lillian Ponton, Ponton. And she was a friend of my father's sister. And my father somehow or another got a hankering to her. And he was a lot older. And I think he was 29. He liked young girls. And I think he was 29 when he met my mother. Maybe 27 or 28, because my brother is older than me. And as a result of the meeting, he had my brother. My mother had my brother, and I think she was 16 years of age at the time. And she had me. I think she was 18. And what my father did, he took her out of Weldon, North Carolina, and took her to New York. And that's why I was born in Harlem on 135th Street.
Okay.
In an apartment.
Okay. Now, you said you were raised in foster care?
Yes. What?
You know, before we do that, I failed to, usually when I start out the interview, I ask the veteran to spell their name, their last name. You go by Reverend Bob.
Reverend Bob.
Reverend Bob Bowser.
You're right.
And how do you spell Bowser? Make sure we have that clear.
Bowser.
Okay. Now, you said you were raised in foster care.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit to that, what that was, how that happened and
Yes.
why?
Yes, how it happened was my mother put my brother and I both into foster care, into New York Foundling Hospital. And as a result of that, we ended up in the foster care, and it was called Edwin Gould Foundation, which we referred to as the home. And the home put us in foster care. And my first foster mother's name was Cora Lane. She was an older woman, and it was she and her mother, who had, that they call Babe, B-A-B-E, who had been a former slave. And we lived in Jamaica, New York. And I didn't know that she wasn't my mother. But I think when I was about 4 years of age, the home took us away from her, because when I say us, meaning my brother and me, because I think she was 65 at the time, and they took us away, and they took us to a place called an orphanage called in Riverdale.
Is that when you realized she wasn't your mother?
Yeah, when they took us.
How did you take that? It had to be a shock.
Not good at all. I'll tell you, I can still remember how they took us, the people from the home. The social worker came and enticed us. That was later. They took us from her. I don't recall. I had to be about 4 or 5. And my brother is a year and a half older than me. They took us to a place in Riverdale, New York, in the Bronx, Upper Bronx, and it's called the Orphanage for Colored Children. That's what it's called to this day.
So they segregated the orphanages.
I'm sorry?
The orphanages were where you were staying. They segregated those.
Oh, absolutely. The United States was a segregated society and still is in many places, as you probably know.
Now, this was New York State.
It doesn't make any difference.
In the 1930s.
It's even worse then. Okay? And I do recall being in the orphanage with the other kids there. It was on the Hudson River in Riverdale. And I can recall looking out the doctor's office and seeing the boats going up and down the river. And my brother, he decided he was going to escape. And he went down the fire escape into the courtyard. And he couldn't get out, of course, but they got him.
He didn't have a plan, though, did he?
No.
Even if he got out, where he was going to go, what he was going to do.
No. Well, how could he? He was a child.
Sure.
A young child.
Sure.
All he knew is he wanted to go back to Jamaica with our foster mother, Cora Lane,
okay.
who we thought was our real mother. And let me just back up a little bit with Cora Lane. When Cora Lane got me, I was 9 months old. And Cora Lane's daughter's name was Lolita Hall, who was a dancer. And I can remember Cora Lane taking me and handing me to her daughter, and she was in the bed. And that was my first recollection. I was 9 months of age. And her daughter we call Aunt Lo. Her name was Lolita. But that was my brother and I had a very, very good childhood in Jamaica up until the time they took us away.
Now, let me ask you, this is going to sound very naive, I'm sure, the question, but the foster care was also segregated?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And I can mention, when I'll get to that later, I mentioned that I was in Edwin Gould Foundation later, okay? And when they took my brother and I, first of all, my first foster mother, Cora Lane, raised so much cane that they got my brother and I and brought us back with her, okay? And we were with her until I was age 8. And then that's when they they took us away again. This was 1937. I was 8 and my brother was, I guess, 9. And how when I say they, I'm talking about the social worker. She enticed us with chocolate kisses. And to this day, I don't like chocolate kisses because I can remember being enticed into the vehicle. And the car took us to a place called Muncie, New York, with Mrs. Betty Johns, who was our next foster mother, who I stayed with, and she had a little farm later on, and I stayed there until I was 17. That's where I learned my work ethics, scrubbing floors, milking cows, sopping hogs, and all that kind of stuff. But what happened, again, Coeur d'Alene raised so much gain, so they allowed her to come and visit us at Thanksgiving and Easter.
And you also said Christmas. That you don't
But at Christmas, my brother and I were allowed to go to her place in Jamaica. And that's the way it was until I just had to get out from under the home. My brother did too. We had to give the home our report cards, and it was always the specter that you'd be sent to a reformatory if you were bad. And I was scared to death most of the time.
Scared to death of your personal safety, or scared
Being taken, uprooted.
be uprooted again?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it happened unexpectedly so many times.
Exactly.
Yeah. It
Exactly.
could happen any other time.
And Mrs. Lane, I don't know how she did it, but she would make that trip from Jamaica, taking subways and buses and things when we were in Rockland County in Muncie, New York, and come and see my brother and me.
Now, how long were you there in Rockland County?
From the time I was 8 until I went to the Navy at 17.
Okay. So you went to school all throughout the
Oh,
period?
yes. But that, in a way, that was a blessing in disguise. Because the school I went to was very high standard. The passing grade in grammar school was 75, and a lot of places was 65. The same thing when I went to high school, it was 75, and then the teachers would say, if you couldn't get at least 75% of your work done satisfactorily, you weren't doing anything. So some kids, we went from, in grammar school, we went from to the 8th grade, and then now they call it middle school, but we went to the 8th grade, and then we went to high school for the 4 years. And we had a selection of what school we wanted to go to. And unfortunately for my brother, he horsed around so much, I passed him, caught up with him. He was a year ahead of me. I caught up with him, and he still horsed around, and I passed him. He never got over it. And the high school he selected was in Nyack, New York. And Nyack and Pearl River, the passing grades were 65. The one I selected was Spring Valley High School, which is basically a Jewish, and there was a lot of money there, okay? And the passing, as I said, passing grade was 75 minimum. And I used to carry, I guess, about 82, 83% average.
So what was your motivation? Was it fear of failure, fear of going back to your orphanage, or you just wanted to be successful, or a combination of all of it?
All of those. And I just wanted to do things. And what happened when I got to high school, well, even before high school, in grammar school, I was part of the band, and my brother was too. When I got to high school, I was in the band there, and I went to football rallies in high school. It was just great. Really, really was.
You obviously felt comfortable there. You felt comfortable,
very comfortable.
Academically and within the social setting also?
Oh, also. That's
Really?
right.
Okay.
And I often had said to myself, if I had someone who my foster mother at the time, Mrs. Betty Johns, she would say to us that the home would send us to college, if we did so and so and so and so. Well, all I could think about is just getting out. But she didn't know, she meant well, but she didn't know how to counsel us and direct our course. So when it came to high school, I selected an easy way. The mathematics I took was general math instead of algebra and then geometry. But if I had the guidance at that time, I think and I said the same thing I said about my son Kevin. I had to really get on him because Kevin.
But this is about you, Dad.
Yes, but again, I'm just saying. But in high school,
there's more that he needs to tell. I want you to get to what happened before you went in the Navy, as far as when the school came and told you about your last name, the discrepancy of that.
Yes, I was in high school, at Spring Valley High School, and I was going to mention about Edwin Gould Foundation. It was segregated. They had another place for Caucasian kids in Spring Valley, Edwin Gould Foundation, okay? We were in the foster care out, but anyway, the home was going to change my name from Ponton to my father's name of Bowser. And I said, if you do, I'm not going to go to school. So they didn't. I didn't become Bowser until I joined the Navy, my brother and I both. Then we took our father's name.
Okay.
But until that time, we were both Ponton, Ponton. So I've been Bowser since I was 17 and raised my hand in the United States Navy on the 27th of February, 1946, at the end of World War II. That's how long I've been Bowser. And I didn't know any other blood relative other than my brother until I was 21. And my brother and I were in Norfolk, Virginia. He was stationed on a destroyer in Norfolk, and I was stationed on the base. And he said to me one day, he said, Bob, I ran into a guy who said he thinks he knows some of our people in Weldon, North Carolina. And my brother wasn't that outgoing. I said, well, tell me more. So I found the family. I went to Weldon and found my relatives. And from that point, I was able to find my mother's people and my father's people.
How'd you feel about that? I mean, they gave you some closure?
Well, it did. It was very, very interesting. And on my father's side, I met my aunt, his sisters, for the first time. And I stayed at one of my father's sister's house. And he was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. And she called him and said, your son is here. And I was sound asleep, and this man came in at the middle of the night, rustling me, telling me he's my father, and blah, 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 blah. And I nearly went to war with him. I didn't know who he was. But at any rate.
Were you able to reconcile with your father?
Not really. My brother did. Mm-hmm. My father and I didn't get along that well together. And my brother and I never got to see our mother.
Was it you were angry with?
No, I just didn't know him. And
his lifestyle was so different.
Well, it was just so different.
Yeah.
So different. I didn't know who he was. Okay.
At what
Well, Crystal, before you go into that, I just want to add that we have here today Crystal Bowser, who is Reverend Bob's daughter,
Oldest child,
Oldest child. Okay, daughter.
yes.
And Kevin, who joined us from Zephyr Hills. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yes.
Yes, that are here also today. So, you were saying?
I know that my grandmother put you into foster care, and then she passed away very soon thereafter.
Wait a minute, who?
Your mother,
Oh, yes.
she had put you in foster care because she was having difficulty trying to manage you and your brother, and then she passed away, and that's how you went through all your school years as Ponton.
That's right.
So it was, my thing is, how did you really feel when they told you in the school that today I'm Ponton, tomorrow you're gonna be Bowser?
How did I feel?
Yes.
I felt embarrassed, and I wasn't going to go to school. And embarrassment. I was a kid, you know? And the same thing happened with one of the Caucasian kids from the Edwin Gould Foundation place in Spring Valley. They did the same thing, wanted to do the same thing with him. And I remember him reacting the same way I did, you know?
Okay, now let me ask you, why did you join the military, first of all? You must have enlisted, right?
Yes.
Right. And secondly, why the Navy? Because you had mentioned earlier about the Navy being so racist, particularly during that period of time.
Well,
So 2 questions there. Why the military and why the Navy?
all right. My brother and I, this was in World War II was going on, and we used to go to the movies, and my brother and I, we see these sailors dancing on on the screen, okay? And we said to one another, that's what I want to be. I want to be a sailor. And so, and all we thought about is that there's going to be music and dancing. And that's how we joined the Navy, why we wanted the Navy. We were kids, you know, and we had that in our minds from the time we were about 14 or 15, seeing Gene Kelly and some others dancing on, and we liked seeing the bell-bottom trousers, you know, and we would see this. We would go to New York and we see the sailors walking in bell-bottom trousers. That's what I want to be. That's what we said. But what happened with my brother, it was a way for us to get from under the foster home, mainly, and having this threat, the specter of being pulled out and sent to some God knows where, you know. And always, and I remember I had to adjust my hearing aid. And I remember always that if you're bad, you're going to end up in a reformatory. I remember those things. And I didn't like the idea of having to send my report card to the home all the time, monitoring me. And I just felt like I was a non-person, subject to the whims of the home, quote unquote. And that's how I went to the Navy, and how my brother went.
So this will give you independence, identity?
Well, it took us away from the home.
Excitement and away from the home, right?
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And we thought that we were going to be men then.
Well, let me ask you this then. Did that work out for you? I mean, initially when you went in the military, was it what you thought?
To me, it was, because, see, I was used to hard work. My work ethic was, you know, like that. Scrubbing floors on my knees and all that kind of. I remember guys in boot camp crying because they never did any work in their lives. And it just tickled me, that's all. But anyway, I was used to doing hard work. And and the Navy sent me to, let me back up about when I enlisted. And see, the home was glad to get rid of us because they didn't have to pay for us anymore, okay? So they took us to a place called Grand Central Palace in New York City, in Manhattan, and to the recruiting station. And there was one other Caucasian kid who was in class with me in high school, and I remember he was there also with me. And what they did, they gave us a test, and then on the papers they would put AS, which means apprentice seaman, and that's what they put on my on this fella papers. They didn't put anything on mine. I said, how come I'm not an AS? So they said to me, well, you're going to be going to Bainbridge, Maryland to be a steward. And my brother had already warned me about being a steward, which was a servant, okay? A flunky for the officers, cleaning up after them and that kind of thing. So Leo had told me about that, because he went a year before me. And I said, I don't have to be in your Navy. So the guy says, well, in order to be an apprentice seaman, you have to take a test. I said, well, give me the test. So they gave me this stupid test. It was racist. They said, if you see a fire near a fire alarm, what would you do? Things like that, stupidity. But anyway, to make a long story short, there was an African-American chief petty officer there, and they told him to talk to me. And he did. And I told him, I don't have to be in your Navy. I mean, that was my attitude. I didn't know what the home was going to do, but all I knew was I was 17 and I didn't have to be in that Navy. And I told him that. So they finally said, well, you passed the test, so you're going to be an apprentice seaman like your classmate. And they sent me we got on a troop ship out of Jersey City, got on a troop train, not ship, troop train, and we went down to Camp Perry, Virginia, which is in Williamsburg, Virginia. Today it's a CIA base, Camp Perry. And I was the only person of color in my company.
Well, at this time, the military was supposed to be integrated.
No, that didn't happen no.
Didn't Truman integrate the
No,
late?
no,
Oh, no,
no.
that was the late 40s.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
talking
right.
about the late 40s. Truman didn't integrate until July 1948. I was
right.
there on
That's right. This was
integration.
before that. That's right.
Yeah, this is before
So your
that.
experience was very common for someone of color or a minority, particularly in the Navy.
The thing that was the key to my success was that I was a typist, and they had a need for typists. And I learned how to type in my sophomore year in high school. And that was the key to my success. And that happened with several others, persons of color who we were called Negroes then, okay? And they would stamp on our service record, big letters, Negro, Negro, Negro. I've been colored, I've been Negro, I've been spat upon, and when I got into the Navy, I mean on a ship and thing, that's where you met people from all over, and particularly the South. And
Well,
that's
that had to be a real eye-opener for you because
well, it was, but
you
I
had experienced certainly racism and prejudice and segregation, but this was a different level, wasn't it?
It was the same that I had seen. Let me back up in high school. I'm in grammar school. I remember in class, as I said, I was the only person of color in my class in grammar school. And I remember there was a girl by the name of Hilda Piper. She was going to have a birthday party. She was going to have a party. and everybody, there's different ones in the class were going to attend the party. So nobody asked me to attend. And this was in the 7th and 8th grade. And she said to me, well, my brother is going to have a birthday party. He was 5 years old. You can come to that. Yeah. Then they used to go swimming at a place called, and this was in Nanuet, New York. They used to go swimming in a place called Lake Nanuet. And I can remember hot, humid days, and a bunch of the kids in the class said, well, we're going to go swimming. Got to Lake Nanuet, and the owners of the place said, you can watch them, but you can't go in the water. That was really the eye-opener. See, you can watch, but you can't go in the water.
So you didn't have any expectations that the Navy would be any different?
Not really. Not really.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've experienced racism all my life. But again, you develop a sense of how to protect yourself from getting so upset and that kind of thing. Or else you'd be fussing and fighting all the time. Or feeling inferior. That's what happened to my brother. Feeling inferior. But the kind of personality that I had, I didn't feel inferior. I would just fight. I fought all kinds of ways. I don't talk about physically fighting. As I gained rank in the Navy, I was in a position to be an advocate for those who were disadvantaged in many ways. And because I had rank, I could do that. But a chief petty officer in the United States Navy is a big deal. I'm telling you. We are called the backbone of the Navy, chief petty officer. Well, when I became a chief petty officer, they didn't even want to recognize me, okay? I don't know whether you ever heard about or saw the movie Man of Honor with the first black Navy diver. You heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With Cooper Gooding Jr.
Yeah, he played the part.
He played the part.
Right. And Robert De Niro.
Well, I remember the guy. Bashir, yeah. I remember him.
When did you become a chief petty officer?
I became a chief petty officer on the 16th of November, 1958. I became a chief yeoman, which was administrative, legal, and that sort of thing. And I had to take an examination.
You went in 1946. It took you 12 years to get to that level. Is that considered average? It would take 12 years to get to that level, or did you?
No, it would. As a matter of fact, yes, that was the average.
It was.
Yes.
Okay, but you must have had a lot of roadblocks along the way.
Oh, Lord, yes. But I was sent to different schools and things. I went to Naval Justice School, Newport, Rhode Island, where I learned court reporting and that sort of thing. I went to Navy schools, and I was good in schools. And I went to one in San Diego, California, to learn shorthand. They taught us, this is in 1952, 51 or 2. They taught us 2 years of high school Gregg shorthand in 16 weeks in the United States Navy. And they said to us, it'll come to you. And we would be marching to chow and everything. And the guy said, Bowser, listen, it'll come to you. And he was right. And I'd go to the library, and the magazines were in shorthand, the books were in shorthand. And one day I was walking to lunch. No, we're not walking, we marched. And it came to me. I understood it, and I was able to read it and write it at that time.
Did they teach you Pittman or
Greg. Greg Simplified is what it was called.
Oh.
We had brief forms and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't use it, you lose it.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea why they taught us that, to be court reporters. But soon thereafter, the Navy developed what is still going on in the legal profession called stenomask, where you speak into, you notice people speaking in to a mask. They repeat what's being said in the court. Some of them use the stenotype, but stenomask is what we had. And it was a great thing, was a boon, because they couldn't get very many sailors or people who did shorthand. I was writing 120 words a minute and lost it. I was typing like 60 words a minute at that time, and that was on a manual typewriter. I was typing 76 words a minute on a manual, and the best manual typewriter I ever used was the Underwood Upright, the best typewriter.
Now, you were also a veteran of the Korean War.
Yes, I am. That was my combat war.
Okay. That war started in 1950. I think it was June 1950.
No, yes, June 1950, that's correct.
Okay. When were you deployed to Korea?
All right, I was on the base at Norfolk. I was stationed at Norfolk, Virginia then. And what happened, let me just say this, sir. I was going through a lot of changes down in Norfolk, Virginia. And the office that I was supposed to work in had, because of the ranking that I had at the time, third class yeoman, which was administrative. And when I reported for duty, they did not expect a person of color, a Negro at that time, to show up. And the office I was supposed to work in had 4 white women and 2 sailors, and I was going to be the second sailor. They told me to have a seat out in the lobby. I had a seat in the lobby. They transferred me from headquarters, 5th Naval District, to the receiving station. And that also happened in Brooklyn, too. And they didn't want me on staff of the headquarters, 5th Naval District. So how I got to the ship, later on I ended up getting a humanitarian transfer from Norfolk, Virginia, because Mrs. Lane, my first foster mother, was sick. And I was transferred, got a humanitarian transfer to Brooklyn, New York. I was supposed to be there for 4 months. I'm getting to how I got to the ship. So then, after my 4 months was up, and they said, well, I had orders to go to what is called, to California, to the, I've forgotten the name, it's something Frontier, but anyway, I got out of it. And how I got out of it, there was a warrant officer named Thomas A. Passeretti, who I knew from the receiving station. Those 4 months there. And he was in the personnel department aboard this new aircraft carrier, the USS Oriskany. It was in Brooklyn Navy Yard. And I told him, he said, well, Bowser, I could use you. He said, I'll take care of it. And he got me transferred aboard the USS Oriskany, that aircraft carrier. When I saw that carriage, I was really moved. It was the most magnificent thing I saw in Brooklyn Navy Yard. And that's how I got on there in 1950.
How many years were you on the Oriskany?
3.
Until 53.
Until 50. I got off at 53 on the battle line in Korea, off at Japan.
What was your specialty? What was your job on the Oriskany?
Administrator. I was the captain's writer. No. It was I was a first class yeoman, and I was doing what do you call? I was a classified correspondence yeoman for the ship. I would run up on deck and meet the helicopters and get the officer messenger mail and all the classified mail, and I did the the paperwork for people to get clearances and those kinds of things. And I tell you, running up on that flight deck was something. But I was young. But
Now, was that your job for the 3 years you were on the ship?
I became that's right. But I later I was second class, and then I became first class, and I was the captain's. That's what I did. And then I got orders to go to New York, the headquarters, 3rd Naval District in New York. And the captain said to me, the captain's name, his name, same name as this hospital, Courtney Shands. And I can remember him saying, he says, Bowser, the Navy says if you can't come to New York now, they're going to cancel your orders. He says, I'm not going to be like a lot of commanding officers. They get rid of their bad people, and they won't give their good people a chance. He says, you're an outstanding person. I'm not going to hold you back. And they put me on a high line to go from doing replenishment. I went from a high line to an oiler to another ship. That's some experience.
What's a high line? What is a high line?
Oh, it's a chair on a line moving between the ships. Oh, while the ships are in motion.
Oh. Oh. Okay.
So anyway, that's how I high line to get off of the Oriskany on the battle line. Okay, and we had already gone through some things on there because we had a plane that about the bombing and all that stuff. But anyway, that was really something, and that's when I had my orders to go to New York. And Captain Courtney Shands, he became an admiral. He says, Bowser, you deserve to go home and go to New York.
So it's the Oriskany that got hit with where the thing blew up on and some people
That's right.
died and everything?
That's right.
Okay.
Well, how'd you get back to the Oriskany now?
No, the officer Shands sent him off because
I had orders to go to New York.
yeah, but this was after the ship had got hit by
Oh, this is
bomb.
1953 you're talking.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
I'm still in 1950. Okay, hold on a minute here.
Oh, you're still in 1950. That's how I got on.
I'm a chronological guy here. I got to go through
Okay.
the years, yes.
Okay, back up then. Tell me what you want.
Okay, 1950, is that when you actually went on the Oriskany?
Yeah, I got on the Oriskany in 1950.
And you're on for 3 years.
Yeah.
And you did tours in the Mediterranean. That was the initial tours, but you didn't go to Korea until September of 52?
Until December of 52.
52, okay, that's when you actually entered combat area.
That's right.
Okay, you
I
want to
was
talk?
in the winter offensive of 1952 and the spring offensive of 1953.
Okay, now, you said you worked for the captain on the ship. So you were in kind of the center of what was going on all the time.
Yeah.
You must have known what was going on all the time, whereas most people on the ship didn't.
That's exactly right.
Right, right. So you entered combat in 52. Well, tell me about that. What was that like?
I was on an aircraft carrier, first of all.
Right.
It was arduous. You're on the go constantly, okay? And the pilots is smelling gasoline, aviation gas, ammunition, and up 2, 3, 4, you're on the go because you were the support for these pilots who were dropping the bombs.
Mm-hmm.
And it was up 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I was gung-ho. I was up 2, 3, 4.
While you were on the Oriskany, what were your sleeping quarters like?
Integrated. It wasn't, but when I was aboard the USS Lady, the first aircraft carrier before the integration came in 48, we were segregated aboard that. People of color were. And I can remember when Truman signed the executive order integrating the armed forces, July 1948. Then they put us together. We worked with everybody else, but they didn't allow us to sleep because that was the state of mind of the dominant culture in the United States of America.
Was there a lot of pushback from your fellow sailors when they integrated you into the sleeping quarters and eating and everything?
Yeah, mainly from the officers. Mainly from the officers. They didn't do anything to try to smooth things because many of them were from the South. Okay, the United States Navy was known to be basically a racist organization. I didn't know that because most of the people were from the South. And I can still remember when I was in boot camp, marching along, carrying my rifle, marching along, and the guy would kick me and try to trip me. And I said, would you stop that? And he was someplace down south. But he kept on doing it, and I said, you do that again, I'm gonna knock your block off. But anyway, what happened, I said, one of these days you may need me and I may need you. And you know what happened? He got sick, and nobody else would help him. And I helped him to a sick bay. I couldn't get rid of him after that. I could not get rid of him after that. And I said, you remember what I said? He said, Bowles, I'm so sorry. And I also had a problem with a white Puerto Rican guy, and he and I went to war, and he said something that he shouldn't have said to me. And this is in boot camp. And I went to war with him, and the company commander said, there's no fighting in this man's Navy, and it was raining cats and dogs. So what he did, he said, they have a clothesline that looks like a T, He had us sit up on top of that clothesline, pouring down rain, and with our ponchos on, and we had to do like this, flap our wings, say, I'm a doo-doo bird, but they did not doo-doo, but something else. And I just laughed, I was 17, I just laughed, and this Puerto Rican kid, he was crying, and the more he cried, the more I laughed. I'm a doo-doo bird. I can still remember that. And then one other time in boot camp, what happened, I had not been in a swimming pool. And when we went to swimming class, and the water felt so good. And I jumped in the pool again. And the company commander said, who told you to get in that pool? I said, nobody. He said, well, come out and you give me 25 push-ups. Well, I was used to doing that. And I did it. And he said, give me 25 more. I did it 25 more. He said, now listen, you don't do things on your own in this man's Navy. But anyway, that's what happened with the swimming pool. But boot camp was an experience, and I'm coming back up to the USS Oriskany. and we got our pay in boot camp. The first pay we got was called Flying Five. That was $5. And because it went so fast, they called it the Flying Five. The next time we got paid, we got $10. That was called the Floating 10. You know, and it's something that was boot camp. But going back to the Oriskany, that was serious business, real serious business.
Now, that's the one that got hit by a plane exploded on it? Or
Well, the one of our F-4Us, a Corsair, came in with a hung 250-pound bomb, and when it hit the deck, hit the flight deck, the bomb came off and went teetotally like this and hit number 3 elevator and exploded down into the hangar deck where other planes were preparing to take off for a raid. And the shrapnel went through the wing tanks, on these gasoline wing tanks on the planes down. It's wondered the whole place didn't go up. But it happened on other carriers when it did. John McCain was on the Oriskany, and that later on during the Vietnam War.
Where were you at this time?
The Vietnam War?
no,
You're on the
when you were on the Oriskany.
You're on the
thing,
Oriskany.
Oh.
Where were you?
Where were you on the ship?
I was on what they call the deck below the flight deck. I was down the passageway, or hallway, as you civilians say, and it scared the daylights out of me.
What was your first thought? You were being attacked, or you knew it was an accident?
No, I didn't know what it was. Other than that, it was a big explosion, and we had about 20 some odd sailors that were disabled in many ways, and several were killed and maimed, arms blown off, all kinds of things. Life aboard an aircraft carrier then and now is probably the most dangerous job in the Navy. Huh?
In the world.
Yeah, and guys get sucked up into jets on the flight deck. It's tough. At that time, I was running up on the flight deck to get the officer messenger mail that came in on what they call the cod flights, which means carry-on deck delivery. That's what they call a cod. And I'd meet and get the classified officer messenger mail. And man, that wind would be blowing, and I'd be like this, meeting these helicopters. But it's no joke. You know, I have a lot of respect for the guys who are on these carriers today. I'll tell you.
So do you want to talk about the next ship after that, or you want to talk about this picture when you were?
What picture?
That one.
Oh, this picture. Oh, show it to him.
Okay, I will. But
Well,
do you
that's
want to talk about the other ship or this?
Now, this is my last combat ship.
Okay. That.
This happened in '49.
Okay, we'll get you a bigger picture of this.
Okay.
Okay, I thought he would have had it there, but he didn't. So, but we can get that to you.
Okay. What ship were you talking about now?
Well, this was.
That was at headquarters, 3rd Naval District.
Third who district?
Headquarters, 3rd Naval District. That's New York. I was on shore duty then.
Okay. But talk about what that picture was about, because you told me that only select people were asked to be there, and that they had someone from each branch of the service.
Okay.
That picture was on the page. And Alex Haley was supposed to be there, but he was sick. That's the only reason he's not in the picture.
The one who was sick was Alex Haley,
Yes.
who was the author of Roots.
Yeah.
He was a journalist for the Coast Guard at Governor's Island, and he was supposed to be in that picture with the other. That's called the Armed Forces Information. Armed Forces Information, Press Information. with press release. That's where I learned to do press releases and all that stuff.
So why were you all gathered there for that picture and you had to explain whatever was going on in the,
That was a photo op.
okay.
That was for the PR.
That's right.
Yes, okay, okay. So you were on the ship, the Oriskany, the aircraft carrier, through 1953.
Yeah.
When you came back, how did you feel when you came back, when the armistice was signed? Was it a big relief?
I'm trying. Well, I didn't think much about it because I was at headquarters 3rd Naval because I had also gone through some racism crap at headquarters 3rd Naval District. They didn't want a person of color on their staff, so they transferred me to what was called a receiving station, which is at Brooklyn Navy Yard. And so, I'm still going through all that junk. So, and how
Did you see any progress at all along those lines the first 5-6 years?
No,
No.
no.
Did you ever see progress? Let's get to the end of that one. Did you ever see progress through your Navy career
No,
concerning the racism issue?
no,
No.
no. Let me say this. The dominant culture is the dominant culture because that's the way they are. There's no change in Trump today and his cohorts and the things about nationalism and racism. I don't even want to get off onto that. It's the same thing.
Okay. So, okay, let's narrow it. Let's keep it to the Navy at the
Okay.
moment. Okay, keep it to the Navy. When did you leave the Navy?
I retired on June 17th, 1965.
65.
That's active duty.
Right, okay. During that time, the active duty, we'll stick to the racism issue at the moment. You are saying from 1946 to 64, you did not see any change?
The only change I saw was when the integration because of Truman's
Truman.
executive order.
Okay.
I was in
The official status you saw, that was a major change, obviously.
right, but that was it.
But when the rubber met the road, when you had to live everyday life in the Navy, the culture didn't change.
No, because the people who were racist were still racist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the ones who were now let me be clear about that. There are many people of the dominant culture who were great, and who but there's still that segment. Okay, because it wasn't all. I can remember. Let me back up when in 1950 was before I went aboard the Oriskany, and I was in 48 I was in Norfolk, Virginia on the carrier, the USS Lady, and that was before integration started. I was on Liberty, and Liberty is getting off the ship, to go about town. It was summertime and we were in white uniforms, and I remember in Norfolk, Virginia, we had to go into, of course, it was segregated. And I remember someone spiking my drink, my Coca-Cola, and I ended up being high. And I was in white uniform, and I remember laying in the gutter. And I remember the policeman, a big, fat Southern cop, said, if you don't get that N-word guy out of the gutter, I'm going to put his so-and-so in jail. And this guy said, oh, we'll take care of him. Well, they didn't take care of me. And I ended up running through town, and I ended up in the cemetery. And I jumped through the hedges because I didn't drink, but that stuff. And these I still got the barbed wire marks on my legs today from that. Okay,
So
that was before I got to the.
That was intentional? That was done to you intentionally?
I'm sorry?
that was done to you intentionally? They spiked your drink?
Oh,
Or do you think it was just some guys being funny and putting alcohol in because?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, our sailors did that. I know. I guess other guys did too. Yeah.
Okay. There was another incident concerning racism that Crystal had mentioned to me a couple days ago. It had to do with your wife.
Oh.
She was selected. Let me see if I got this right. Mrs. U.S. Navy Tri-State Area.
That is correct.
Is that right?
She may even have a picture of it.
Yes. So, here we go. They were in Jet, they were in the New York Times, and this magazine called Hugh, and this was when they went to California.
Okay.
But it's in California where they wouldn't do my mother's hair when they found out that she was married to my dad.
Okay, let me see if I can get this straight. Your wife was considered white or black?
She looks like a Caucasian.
Okay.
But she is actually biracial. She's
Okay.
African American, Native American, and Caucasian.
And some Spanish in there.
Yeah. Okay?
That would be considered typical American, but
Yes,
yes.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay. But she looked white.
Yes.
People,
She looked
she could
white.
pass for white.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Terminology that was used, she used to
Pass.
That's right. Okay, got that right. Now, probably because of that, she was selected Miss U.S. Navy Tri-State Area?
No.
Or it didn't matter? That didn't matter.
She was selected based on writing an essay on why I'm proud to be a Navy wife.
Okay.
Okay?
So that was colorblind the choice?
It had to go before a board, and the board selected her.
Do you think because they thought she was white?
No.
No.
It
no.
was based on the writing.
Oh, it was based on the right. Okay, I just want to get that clear because I
Yeah.
know there was other issues here that developed.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And because that was the tri-state area, but then when they got to California,
Right.
because they were finalists,
I see. Okay, so they're going to pick a Mrs. U.S. Navy overall
right, for the whole United States.
for the whole United States. So tell us the rest of the story when she got to the West Coast.
When she got to the West Coast, in Long Beach in the hotel, and in preparation for the event, the wives were sent to the beauty salon in the hotel. Now this is 1958 now. Bear in mind the society in general was a racist society here. They told, when they found out who she was married to, they couldn't do her hair. They couldn't in the beauty salon. And she went to see the naval officer who was in charge, the wave officer, lieutenant commander, and she said, well, there's nothing I can do. So she had to go in town to get her hair done. And as we were riding in the parade, they had 1950. They had Oldsmobile convertibles where the husbands who were escorts drove their wives in the parade. And I can still remember to this day as we were driving the parade, and I still remember this southern white woman's voice saying, well, I declare, she's as white as I am. And I nearly cracked up. I still can remember hearing that, say that. But it was a racist society then. And, you know, I mean, that's what I came up with.
Wasn't that 1956? 'Cause
Eight.
the pictures.
Six.
Like
Right.
six
You-
months old.
Right, and I was.
Yeah, it was what did I say,
You said
58?
58. That-
Oh, that's when I made chief.
it wasn't 58.
56. It was 56.
He was a baby, and I was just
You were,
I was about 4.
Kevin, you were, he was 1 year old.
Yeah, he was sick the day they had taken some pictures. So this is the parade that when that lady made that comment. When
Okay,
they
and
were
there he
riding
is
in the
there.
car. Yes, and they were, because they had to watch some ships go by and so forth.
There was a fleet review. They only did this one time. There was a fleet review. Secretary of the Navy was there, and all big mucks.
I hate to say it, but probably they didn't expect you all to get as far as you did in the contest,
Yeah.
and they decide, oh, we can't take this chance again. You know?
I don't
Okay.
know.
Needless to say, your wife did not become
No,
Mrs. Navy USA, I guess.
Not for the whole country.
Not
no.
for the whole country.
But she was still for the.
Not that she
for
wasn't
the
qualified, or
right.
it was probably, and at
Runner-up.
the time, it was also based on attractiveness and
Yes.
beauty and.
Yes, but she received all kinds of flowers and a wardrobe and all this stuff in the New York area.
Right, right. And the New York area had no problem with that.
that's right.
Right. So there was progress in New York. Well, from what you describe it, 20
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, understand. So the USS Oriskany was brought off the line in '53. Did you stay on the ship after that, or where'd you go from there?
I went to headquarters, 3rd Naval District in New York,
Okay.
and it was on my way.
Did you stay stateside the rest of your service?
No,
No.
I went to New York, and I was there for 3 years, and that's where, excuse me, that's where I was supposed to be on the staff. And I was on the staff, and I was in the. I had to remember. I was on the staff. The first time I was there in '48, went to. Thank you.
Do you want to take a break?
No,
a few
no,
minutes?
no.
You okay?
First time I was on staff in 1949. That's when I reported for duty, they transferred me to the receiving station because they didn't have people of color on the staff at the Admiral staff. And but the second time, I was attached to. It was better the second time because we had integration. But the first time, they transfer any person of color who. See, they didn't expect persons of color to have the job that I had. That's what it was, administrative and legal and that sort of thing. So the Admiral they had a thing where they would just intercept you and not let you go on staff. The same thing, the receiving station was used to intercept people of color from going to Newfoundland. And they would, see, because it was they didn't know what your race was until you showed up. A lot of time, and in that time, they no longer had a stamp on the record of saying Negro and this, that, but they had another thing. They used numbers. Okay, they used the numbers to identify.
So they had a
Okay.
way around it.
I'm sorry?
Well, they had a way around it then.
Oh,
Instead
yeah.
of stamping in Negro, they would have assigned
Yeah,
numbers.
well, this was the whole government was like that because the era that this thing was happening in the 50s, there was a lot of money, and companies were trying to get government contracts and so forth, and they could not unless they had a certain percentage of people of color. Okay, so how could they identify unless they couldn't say Negro, and so they used a number to identify the individuals.
Well, let me ask you, you said your records up until 1948, they would stamp it Negro,
Right.
correct? Did they expunge that from your records after 1948? Or
Yeah,
Or if
they
you went
did.
back
They
to look at-
changed the whole record.
they did?
Yeah, they changed the whole record type of record they were using.
Okay.
Okay, and there was nothing there to show until a person showed up.
Right.
Okay,
So you were a good person, you were qualified for a job until someone saw you who didn't like your race.
that's exactly. Didn't like my color. Yes,
Yeah, your
exactly.
color. Didn't like your color.
That's right.
Yeah.
No matter how qualified.
Right, right.
So when did you go to the Essex?
I went to the USS Essex just before I retired. I had what happened. My tour of duty at headquarters 3rd Naval District was up, and I was supposed to go to an aircraft carrier out of Mayport, Florida, and I got a swap with a. Okay, I got a swap to the Essex. The guy who was on the Essex wanted to be here. His family was here, and he and I were the same rank, chief petty officers, and we swapped. That's how I got the Essex.
Well, you were chief petty officer now on this ship, right? What
Not
was-
on the Essex. On the Essex, yes.
Yeah, what was your job as chief petty officer now? Because
Same. I'm
obviously that's a very high, I mean, is that the highest?
well. The chief petty
non-officer
officer has
rank?
three things: E7,
Okay.
E8, and E9.
And you were
I was an E7.
7, okay.
And that came into being in 1948. And we used to call them super chiefs after the train. There was a train called the super chief.
So what was your job on the Essex then, as chief petty officer?
Yes, I was the. I had a problem there too because they didn't want to give me recognition, so they had me on special projects.
So let's go back to when you became a chief, because that year you said that there were only a handful of people across the nation that became it, and there were 2 black folks, you and one other person.
Oh, on the ship that I was on a transport. On a
No, I mean when you received that rank, you
No, there
told me
was-
that year only.
That year that I received the rank as a chief yeoman, there were only 16 of us made in the United States Navy, and I was one of 16. But that's through written examination. See, they didn't know me from beans, but I had all the credentials. I'd been to Naval Justice School. I'd been to Naval Class B school with the shorthand. I'd been to this and to that, and plus I had good grades. Efficiency reports. I had officers who didn't want to give me a good fitness report because of my color. My commanding officer, John Robert North, on the troop transfer. I was his chief petty officer, and I asked him. I said, "Well, how did I do?" He was getting transferred. They only stayed a year, the commanding officer, so they could rotate out. He said, "Well, I didn't complain, did I?" And, he would get me up in the middle of the night to dictate letters and all this stuff. I'm talking about 2 and 3 in the morning. And then I had to be there right on time the next morning, for muster and all this stuff. And I never could understand why, being way out at sea, I had to be in my tie, white shirt and tie and everything. But that's the way it was. But John Robert North, he was a pistol. He was a pistol. He was a segregationist. And he robbed me of a lot of sleep.
So, okay, what was your job on the Essex? I'm trying to hone in on that. As chief petty officer, what were you responsible for?
I was supposed to be the chief in the captain's office, which is the captain's writer. But the powers that be did not want me in that position. So they devised a special project to put me on. Was developing was some sort of okey-doke book or something. And that's what I did until I retired. I went through changes, and I had to walk on eggshells so that they wouldn't take away my rank for insubordination or something like that.
Now, you retired in 65. Were you engaged in any actions relative to Vietnam?
Oh, no,
No. Okay.
no. I was just a veteran of that era,
Right.
just like in World War II. I was a veteran of the World War II era. The World War II era, well, I was non-combatant, but because I was in the service at that time, which 46 to December of 47 is when the era ended. Okay, and I don't know when it ended for Vietnam.
Right. Right.
Can I ask about the time when, just prior to President Kennedy being assassinated, I know you had orders to be transferred to France. I remember that. We were studying French on records, and then when the president was assassinated, your orders changed. Can you elaborate on that? Because
I cannot. Nobody could tell me about that. They couldn't tell me about it. And you know, that's when I got orders to go to that ship down in Timbuktu, here in Florida.
Oh, Mayport.
Mayport. But I went to Washington to see a commander who was the navigator on the Oriskany, and he was stationed in Washington. And he got me orders to go to Naval Justice School in Newport, Rhode Island. But he said, there's nothing I can do, Bowser, about those orders to France.
Yeah, because that was a big disappointment.
Well,
Where did you end up? Where did your orders change to? What did they change to? You were going to go to France.
yeah,
happened?
but I was going to go to an aircraft carrier.
Okay.
And but I got the orders to go to the Naval Justice School in Newport, Rhode Island.
Okay.
And after that, I got orders to go to, I cannot remember now.
So you weren't able to use your French
No.
at that point?
No.
No.
It was the first time that he was going to let us go where he was,
Right.
as opposed to we lived in Sag Harbor. My mother was a married single parent because my dad was always
Was
away
gone.
on the ship
Right.
or, wherever he had to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
it was very exciting that we were going to be moving to
France. Yes, we were
and
going to
being
Paris.
together,
Yes.
and then that didn't happen.
No, it didn't work out that way. All right. Let me talk about another part of your life, civilian life, which is very important to you, obviously. You are a Reverend.
Yes.
You want to talk about that for a bit? How did that
Yes.
come about?
How that came about. The Lord spoke to me one day. I had this unction from the Holy Spirit that I needed to go to seminary. I don't know where it came from. That's the way God does. He takes the most unlikely people to do his work. And certainly I felt I was most unlikely. And the next thing I know, meanwhile, I was here in North Carolina, and the next thing I know, I was at Shore University Divinity School. Raleigh,
What
North.
year was this?
86, somewhere down there.
What did you do in between 65 and 86?
Oh, I was in the personnel department of Blue Shield of New York. Personnel, and also as a, I think I gave you one of my resumes here. It gives you the whole Megillah.
Okay.
Okay, but I think that, did I put a resume in there, Crystal?
I'm looking. I'm not sure that this is the resume though. But
But anyway,
We can get that at a later point.
I worked for Blue Shield, and I was a manager for Blue Shield in their correspondence department. That's what I did.
Where was that?
New York, Manhattan.
New York, yeah.
And then from there, I went to work for New York State Department of Labor as an interviewer, and then I got promoted to be an employee relations field rep. And I stayed that until the Lord called me to come down here to North Carolina. And I ended up in Shore University. And this, of course, down here was where some of my people were, in Weldon. But that experience at Shore University was the most exciting experience I ever had in terms of learning and education. I learned how to learn, first of all. And because I was a typist, as you probably know, in a lot of colleges, they require you to have your papers typed. At least...
No, all colleges. It's not.
Huh?
That's required, period.
Okay. But anyway, because I was typist, that was no sweat.
Right.
Okay. And so, but anyway, I just had a grand time learning how to learn. And I ended up becoming summa cum laude in my class. And I didn't know what summa cum laude was until I heard the president of the college saying that I would walk across the stage, summa cum laude. I didn't know what it was. Tried to get the dictionary to look it up. It's highest academic. And sometimes I had to look at my ring. It's on my ring, too. But anyway, that's the magnificent experience I had. And then I thought the Lord wanted me to be the pastor of a church. So I'm in North Carolina, mind you. And I went around to vacant pulpits, sent my resume out, and they'd call me to do what they call a trial sermon. They did not want me. And the reason they didn't want me, I didn't sound black enough. I said I was an Oreo, black on the outside and white on the inside. And I didn't know what a hoop was. And in the black rural church in the South, a hoop is this. That's a hoop. They don't learn anything because they don't know anything. And it's not their fault, because that's the way it was from slavery time. However, the educated ministry that I was a part of, one day the Holy Spirit mentioned to me, said, Bob, stop going around to these churches. And drew my attention to what is called the Fivefold ministry in Ephesians. The Fivefold ministries says some are called to be apostles, some are called to be evangelists, some are called to be preachers. And it's gone down the line, and some are called to be teachers. And that was me. And once that happened, I relaxed and became an outstanding teacher for the Lord. Because he gave me the credentials to do it.
Now, how old were your children when you had this major career change?
Oh, we were adults and.
You were gone.
Well, I had children at this point.
Okay.
I was 56 years old when I was called to seminary.
Okay.
Yeah, and I left New York State Department of Labor and came down here to North Carolina. You know, the Lord directed my path. And what he did...
Let me ask you, was your wife still alive at that time? Was you still married?
No, we were not married. We had divorced.
You had divorced, okay.
Okay.
So you were living a single life. It was just you.
It was
Your
just...
children were grown,
Yes.
gone.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. So that gave you an opportunity to think about, reorient your life, what you wanted to do with the rest of your life?
Well, when the Lord directed my thoughts towards seminary,
Sure.
because as I said, the job I had as a
Well, what
field
I'm driving at, it wasn't like you were bringing young children along with you,
Right.
uprooting them,
No,
uprooting,
no.
okay,
But I was working in New York State Department of Labor,
right.
okay, as that field rep, employee relations representative on Long Island. State car, the whole McGill. Free wheeling, but that's when the Lord put a change, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I ended up down at here in North Carolina. And that was...
What did your children think of this?
We didn't know anything about it.
You didn't?
No. Not until after he had finished school. He didn't say anything, at least not to me. Did he say anything to you? No. We didn't know anything about it.
Were your children stunned?
I don't know. They were grown up. They were grown. I was 56 years old then.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked.
Right, okay. Well, I was wondering how Reverend Bob perceived it. Were your children surprised or not? And they have a little different view, I guess, in terms of being
All I
surprised.
know is the Lord directed my path.
Sure, okay. And then this was your calling for the next, until today.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
How active are you now?
What do, I have little ministries that I do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And little counseling things. But since I came to here, I live with my daughter is my caregiver because I came down because my wife had gotten sick. And Crystal was taking care of her, and she passed, 3 years ago, this past October.
My parents remarried after 20-some years of divorce. They were remarried for 20-some more years.
Yeah.
So, just to help you with, well, you said this and now you're saying that, so yes.
So there's a happy ending to the story.
You're seeing it right here.
Yeah, that's right.
You're seeing it.
I can tell.
We all participate, we both, and our families all participated in that reunion when they remarried.
Yes.
In North Carolina. I was the best man.
I don't know what I was, but I.
You was the maid of honor for your mother.
A formal,
Yeah, a
wedding,
big,
church
yeah.
wedding. It was-
My
it
mother was like,
Fantastic.
I want it like this. We're having a big wedding. So we had a big wedding. And my 4 children were in the wedding. So it was
Wonderful.
It was nice.
Wonderful. Okay, we've gone on quite a bit here. I mean, it's almost 2 hours.
Well, it is.
It's almost 2 hours, and I don't have any problem going on. However, I would advise you ought to write a book.
We've been trying
Because-
to get in that direction.
There's so much we haven't touched on here. There's so many other questions I have. You have so many stories, and you have such a unique perspective on things. And the story ends happily, up to this point, certainly. I advise you to write a book.
Like they say, if the Lord is willing, this is what they say in Appalachian Mountain folk.
Yeah.
If the Lord is willing, then the creek don't rise.
Because I know we've only touched maybe some issues a little more in depth than others, but there's so many other things I'm sure we haven't covered.
Well,
I don't know if this is the format and how deep we can go on this, because your life is so interesting, so very interesting.
well, I'm in preparation to gather myself to start putting things pen to paper.
Well, this is part of it also.
Yes. I'm encouraging him to speak into a tablet or of some sort as opposed to having to handwrite it. His handwriting isn't the easiest to read. It is for him, but it isn't for other people that have to
Sure.
read it.
Sure, I can understand that. Well, at this point, I think we're going to either take a long break, or we're going to end the interview at this point. And I want to say thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This has been so interesting.
Really?
And, oh, really?
And was living up north, so he was in Virginia, so that was like a halfway point. So folks came from New York and New Jersey and Massachusetts.
Birthday cake. That's hot stuff. The first chocolate birthday cake I ever had.
Really?
I was 7
Wow.
years old.
Now, it's not yellow cake. I couldn't get yellow.
Okay.
How about a little happy birthday?
Yes,
Happy
birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Reverend Bob. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Thank you. You want me to blow now?
Yes, you can blow them down.
You get a second shot.
All right.